18 minutes. Takes so much, but it's not, nothing past 18. We started it in March, but remember we made her go back and she did.
Maybe I'll relocate somewhere else in the office here. Okay. I'm going to assume again that you guys can hear me and we're ready to go. Can you hear me, Lauren? I can see you. Okay, thanks. All right, you guys, thanks for showing up. We have our September university class planned for you. And these classes are CAT approved. So part of the requirement of that is that we can see your face on the screen and take that as attendance so that we've got you logged for 50 minutes of learning. So keep that in mind as we move through this. We are going to cover some popular safety things that have come up, frequent habits, different things like that as we move through this. Kara and I are co-hosting today, so she's going to cover a portion and I'm going to cover a portion. I should say we're actually, we're multi-hosting. Lauren's also covering a portion. So you know, she's got the technology part of it. And then at the end, we're going to ask you guys to participate and let's discuss anything that's happened to you that maybe you could share with the group. I really am a strong advocate for realtor safety, safety in general, but realtor safety is a big deal. And I'll share that and spread that out to all property managers as well, including our support staff, as we're going into spaces that are often viewed as quote unquote safe, but they're not always safe. So we take this pretty serious. And so as we maneuver through this towards the end, we'd love to hear if you guys have anything that's happened to you, some stories that you could share. Knowledge is power, and a lot of times we take things for granted, but if you hear that that happened to somebody else, it gives you permission to be safe. So that's what we're looking for here. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide and talk through this. I think this one was Kara's, wasn't it?
It is mine. Just some showing safety tips, and this is going to go for the sales side or the rental side. I'm not going to really go in a particular order on this, but one of the most important things is that you're coordinating your showings to be during the day and that you're not scheduling things at dark. And so if you are having to go after hours when it is dark out, because I know this winter, as time changes, it's going to get dark earlier, and there might need to be a showing that's during those hours. And I would heavily suggest that you take someone with you. One good thing to do also is anytime you're showing a vacant property, to make sure that you're like opening up the window shades, get there ahead of time, be familiar with your surroundings. It's always a good tool to park in the street and don't park in the driveway. Get to the showing, be ahead of time, be aware of your surroundings, turn all the lights on in the house, be aware of where all of the exits are in the home. And as someone is coming in, if you're showing a house and you're already in it, you want to make sure that if you are walking them through the property, that you are staying behind them and not allowing them to go in front of you. It just gives you control of the situation. One thing that I've seen, it was a safety tip that I thought was a pretty good idea. If you're getting to a property early and you're getting things ready, to take the front door lock and extend the deadbolt out. So if someone does try to come in and were to try to shut the door, it would pop back open, it would distract them, it would take them a minute to kind of figure out what was going on, giving you the opportunity to use another exit to get out of the home if you're in a situation like that. It is always a good idea too that if you've got a call for a showing and you just kind of have that gut feeling like something's not right, it is very good for you to either take someone with you, or if you pull up, and I've done this before where I've pulled up into a situation that I'm not really comfortable with. And so I find an excuse that I need to take a phone call outside, and I allow them to go into the home. Or if I'm walking into the home with them, again, I'm walking behind them and I'm allowing them to view their property, but I am actually staying by a door. So that if in the case that I needed to get out, I could easily vacate the property.
Sorry, I muted. I was telling a story over here and muted land. Back to the showings for just a moment. I wanted to add just a couple things. This time of year gets a little tricky. Like sometimes you may start your showing and it's light out, and then by the time you're done with your showing, it has, changed to dark, or maybe it's, in that time period where it's starting to change. So be conscious of that. Just make sure if you are showing with somebody, even somebody you know and you're comfortable with, make sure you're leaving the house with them at the same time, so you're not there shutting doors and locking it up all on your own as it's dark outside and the day is changing. And then another thing I wanted to add is if you're unfamiliar with a neighborhood, take the time to look that home up on Google Earth or something like that, so you can see, the streets you're driving into. Is it on a dead end? Like, what does it all look like? Just so you're familiar with that. And then I'm going to tell you guys a little story. I would say that this was either my first listing or my second listing. So several years ago, I got a call to go show my listing. And I was very excited, of course, to go show this listing. So I got a call from a gentleman who wanted to take a look at the property. So I'm excited. I get my flyer printed out and I hop in the car and I head there to show the property. And I pull up and there is a van parked outside of the front of the property. And as I pull up behind it, there are several gentlemen who had been working together get out of the van, and one of them is the gentleman I'm meeting to show the property to. So there's probably 5 of them and myself, and the house was vacant. So I got on the phone real quick and called a friend and said, just hang with me for a minute. And I got out of the car and thankfully the house was vacant. So I walked up, introduced myself, of course, and said, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm stuck on this call. You guys go ahead and take a look. Let me know, I'll be out here. And so I didn't go into the property. And some might say, how dare I let people into a home unattended? But I just literally didn't feel safe to go do that. So I had to kind of choose the worst, you know, the best of the worst, if you will. And then after they left, of course, I locked the house. I kind of drove around the block and came back and then just triple checked everything to make sure that we didn't, you know, because I didn't know if they maybe unlocked the back door while they were in there, because I didn't go back into the house until I knew that they were gone. So I then went back and secured the property. But it was just kind of one of those things that, again, not the best situation. Obviously, we're not in the business of letting people into homes unattended per se, but in that moment, I just felt like it was the best decision that I could make. So again, I think that we all need to give ourselves permission that there are going to be situations that come up that you're going to have to kind of decide, you know, what's the best for me in this moment, and deal with the consequences of that later. Thankfully, there was no consequences because nothing happened, and you know, no one was the wiser because I went back and everything was fine and secured at the home. So not a big deal, but I definitely learned a lot from that showing, and didn't approach my showings that way in the future. So I just thought I'd share that. Again, looking for you guys to share some at the end so that we can all be informed of what's going on. Okay, next screen. We obviously need to mention COVID safety. We put together these tips. We've changed it a little bit as time has gone on and we've learned more and more. But this is something that you can share with your clients by request or just in advance, whatever you'd like to do. I have found in my work that some folks are very COVID conscious and they want their home shown a certain way and all the things, you know, handled the way that they state, masks on, shoe covers on, all those things. And I have found some that are okay and don't ask for anything. So you just need to communicate with your customers, your clients, and figure out what they're most comfortable with, what you're most comfortable with on the sales side. On the property management side as a company, while we're showing our properties that we manage, we are requiring that everyone wear a mask in those properties. We've just took that stance as the best so that we just are setting that example and there's no reason for any concern. Next. I think this one's me too. You guys are gonna get sick of hearing me. I know Kara has more on here somewhere. Okay, so open houses. This is a big one. I am a big advocate of co-hosting open houses. I really think that you probably should never do an open house by yourself. I'm not telling you you can't, but I just don't think you should. I think that we as a team have enough folks that would be happy to do an open house with you most of the time. You also have trusted folks that you work with. So for example, a lot of lenders are happy to do open houses with agents. I'm sure you could find one that would be interested in that. But it doesn't have to be someone in the industry. I have had my son attend open houses with me. I've had my husband attend open houses with me. I've had a friend attend an open house with me. That's okay. They can't try to sell the house if they're not a licensed agent, but they can be there with you. It is in your best interest to make sure no matter what, that somebody knows where you're at, that you can call quickly and be able to be in touch with them if need be. But keep in mind, you are advertising that you're going to be at this house from X amount of time and essentially be the only one in the house. So if you don't have a co-host, you're basically telling the world that you're going to be in this house by yourself. Even more so if that house is a vacant house. If I do an open house, if I find myself in a scenario where I absolutely have to host it by myself, I will go introduce myself to the neighbors when I arrive on both sides of the house. And if they don't answer, I'll find someone across the street that will answer. And I don't make it creepy. I really just say, hi, I'm Susan Clark. I'm holding an open here today from 1 to 3. Just wanted to give you a heads up. There might be some extra traffic, but also wanted you to know I'm going to be here alone. So, if you see anything weird, feel free to pop over and say hi, or, check things out. I have never had anybody be weird about that. And thankfully I have not ever had to call on a neighbor, but it always makes me feel a little better for somebody to know. I suppose you could argue that the neighbor then would come do something to you, but I guess I have to trust in people some degree here. The other element that I feel is important is that you ask people to sign in when they come into that open house. If people are not wanting to because they don't want to get spam mail or whatever, then you can just say to them, I will not contact you after this, but I do require, a log of my sellers are requiring a log of who is coming in and out of their house. And that way, that in itself could deter somebody from doing something. But if something is found missing in the home, you could have a log there. I know a couple agents who will ask for ID even from the folks as they come in. So I don't think that's out of line. These are people, they are going into someone's personal home with their personal belongings in it. It's very different than a private showing. A private showing is you and 1 or 2 other people, and you as the agent are walking them through and you're with them the whole time. At an open house, you could have 6, 7, 8, 10 people walk in, and you don't have eyes on that person 24/7. So it's okay to demand that there is built-in safety procedures for you when you're at an open house. So say, give yourself permission today to say, this is how I'm going to do this going forward, and blame it on your sellers or blame it on company policy, whatever makes you feel more comfortable, that will make you do it. We also have in here, when showing the house, always walk behind the prospect. So like Kara said, carry all those showing techniques forward to when you're in an open house. And also make sure that when you do leave that open house, you're following all those same guidelines again. Make sure that somebody didn't open the basement door, and leave it unlocked so they could come back later. That kind of stuff happens. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. Advise your sellers in advance to not leave medicines in the cabinets, laptops out, money, financial information, anything like that. Give them, caution them to be cautious, because if there are 10, 12 people in the house and just you, or even if you're co-hosting and there's 10 or 12 people in the house, it's hard to manage all of that. I know that I was talking to Kara about this, the open houses, as we were prepping for this, and she's to the point now where she only allows X amount of people in the house. And Kara, I'll let you talk through that a little bit, because I think that is probably the next best level, next level that we should be taking the safety here.
Yeah, it kind of teamed up with the COVID-19 precautions, and sometimes we're showing some of our rental properties and there's still a tenant in the property, and so they're a little uncomfortable with having us show it already because of COVID-19. And so I've kind of teamed up. I always have one other person go with me. One of us is staying outside, the other person is inside, but then we're only letting one group at a time enter the house. So they'll go tour it, and then the next person can go in. This allowed us to control it for the COVID thing and to ensure that people were wearing masks when they walked in. But it also helped with the volume of people walking through and knowing who was in the house at that time.
Yeah, so if you think about that, that could be the new open house protocol. And why not? If at that point, as they come into the home, you can, make sure there's masks on, make sure they're signing in, and you tour them the home. So that would eliminate theft. It would eliminate them not signing in, and multiple people in the house. And then you've got your guard at the front door. And again, if you can't find another licensed agent to go with you, then the guard at the door is the unlicensed person and you are the one touring them in the house. Not a big deal. And then that person's, you know, you're just talking to the people out there. And that's probably the best way that I can think of to host an open house for safety. So why not take what we learned through COVID that gave us permission to be more safe and just keep that going? It makes sense. Okay, I think we're ready for the next topic. I think this one's yours, Kara.
Yeah, yours.
I think it is mine. How did I get them all? Okay, so I did kind of allude to this a little bit. You know, remind your sellers that there's going to be strangers in the house, especially during an open. During showings, I really do feel like there's less of a risk. However, I will not be naive to the fact that, you know, there are 3,000 plus agents out there, and you know, while I assume most are great people, there's a chance that, you know, they're not. So again, advising your sellers of all of the safety tips and tricks of locking things up and keeping them safe. Another thing, unfortunately, that it's important to advise your sellers is that their home is now being displayed online 24/7. So one thing I always tell my sellers is, we're going to photograph the inside of your house and your kids' rooms. And oftentimes people have this display with their kids' names on it, you know, or like the name will be in the kids' room, or family photo frame might have the names all over it. You know, I tell people to take that down. Obviously people can look up the, you know, the last name of the people who live in the house, whatever, but you know, it's one step to be a little bit more cautious. They don't need to know what your child's name is, you know, all of those things. Another thing is, you know, that for sale sign in the front yard gives people permission. You know, they may make some assumptions that the house is vacant if it's been out there for a while. There could be all kinds of things that, you know, now they know the layout of the house because of the online photos, so they can kind of case it a little bit. And then if you're hosting an open house, now maybe they came and walked through the open, so now they really know the house. So I do talk about safety to the sellers, and I will tell you that I've maybe had a couple of people shrug it off and be like, whatever, it's fine. But most people listen and appreciate that I alerted them of those things. It really just shows that you care, and that, you know, you've taken the time to let them know that. And then the last thing to really cover on here is pets. You know, for the safety of all, it's really the best thing to just not have pets at the house when you're showing it. I know that there's options, you can kennel them, you can do whatever, but I advise sellers, if there's any way possible, please remove pets for all showings, because they are essentially liable for anything that happens while someone's in their home with that pet. So obviously, if a dog is kenneled or something like that, it's probably low risk, but I just think it's best. And it's probably best for the dog. Maybe that's the other reason. Like most of the time when I'm showing houses and there's a dog in a kennel, like they're miserable. So maybe that's where my passion comes from. Anything to add to this, Kara?
Nope, not on the seller one, huh?
Okay. Next screen then, Lauren. Okay. Phone calls, I'm sure Kara has something to add here, but I'll start.
I can do this one.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So I think the biggest thing with the phone calls is trying to do some of your pre-screening before you're setting up those showings. Getting their information, their name, a phone number. If they're not willing to give you a phone number to call them back on to verify the appointment, that's definitely a red flag. And then also if I'm getting the name from someone and I kind of just have an uncomfortable feeling, I will Google them. I'll check them up on Facebook so I'm aware of who I'm meeting, so that if I get there, they're not the same as the picture, that's also a red flag for me. And then I generally will, if I've made the appointment several days in advance, I will also call again and just follow up and verify, confirm that number works before going to the property.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, double checking that phone number, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do that now. I mean, honestly, you could just plug it into Google, right? And see kind of what pops up a little bit there. But yeah, if I don't know the person, it's a random phone call, that's another thing. I pretty much don't go to those anymore without somebody with me. And again, I've had anybody and everybody go on, like, I got to stop and show this house. It's somebody I don't know. You know, please come with me, and make sure that, you know, it's safe, those types of things. So really, truly don't just assume the best. If you do not know that person, you need to be screening and digging and figuring out, you know, is it legit?
I think there's also like a reverse to that too. So if I set up a showing with someone, and they're expecting me and something happens at the last minute, and I'm going to be sending someone else, I call to let them know that, especially if they're expecting me and I send Ryan Fitzer to the showing and all of a sudden a guy is pulled up and they're expecting a woman there. So I think it's important too to remember the reverse side of that and making sure that the client that's coming up is comfortable.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great point, Kara. I know what else I was going to add here. So Women's Council of Realtors put on a safety lunch a little while ago, and they did a presentation, or they invited, why can't I remember his last name all of a sudden? His name was Carl. His mother was murdered while showing a property. And there's a whole long story to it, but basically she said, you know, it's company protocol that if I've never met you before, that I meet you at our office first, blah, blah, blah. This person talked her out of that and basically convinced her that it'd be okay because his wife was going to come as well. And so she felt safe because his wife was going to come to that, safer because his wife was going to come to that showing, which I think that can be, I used to think that too, I guess. Let me just say that, like, okay, that makes sense. I feel more comfortable with that. Well, what happened is she showed up, she opened up the house, got it ready to show, and he just showed up without his wife and said, oh, I'm so sorry, my wife got stuck at work. Well, there's a big old long story as to what happened next, but don't think that that's a safety net, because it's not. And frankly, his wife was in on it all anyway. So eventually his wife did show up. So even if it's a female, don't be naive to being safe.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please.
Safety buddies, very important. So it's always good that you have someone, whether it's a coworker, a friend, that you can call anytime that you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable, and you establish a code word. But then you also let someone know of where you're going to be. If you're going to be on an appointment, that you just kind of check in with a check-in buddy once you go to that appointment, and then once you leave, so that you have some protocol that if they don't hear from you, they're going to check in with you. I was at a showing that was actually in my own neighborhood, at a listing that I had, and this was a couple weeks ago. And I had a gentleman that was coming to do a tour. It was supposed to just be him that was coming to the showing. And he shows up and there's one other person with him. Well, then they're waiting outside and 3 other gentlemen show up to the showing, and I wasn't expecting any of them. So I quickly thought of who is going to be the closest person to me at this house. And unfortunately, none of my neighbors were home at the time, because I thought, great, guys, what I need you the most. So I knew that Anne was within driving distance. So I sent Anne a text message and said, hey, I'm at this address. Can you drive over here and just stand outside for me? I'm going to stay by the door. I ended up staying by the back door. Anne was in there within like 2 minutes. Also, right after I had texted Anne, I texted 2 more people and just said, hey, here's the address that I'm at. If I don't check in with you in a few minutes, give me a call. And then if I don't answer, I need you to call 911 because they kidnapped me. And it was interesting because actually my seller had a Ring doorbell, and he was one of the people that I had messaged. and said, hey, here's what's happening. He actually took a screenshot of them as they were walking into the house in case we needed it. And then, of course, he was alert and was watching the Ring doorbell during the showing. So having that safety buddy and being aware is super helpful. Those Ring doorbells are extremely nice for a couple different reasons. And I know this is set aside the safety thing, but one thing to keep in mind is to pay attention to those Ring doorbells because there were several times that agents stood outside the front steps and had conversations with their clients, good or bad, and just had a full-blown conversation with them, and my seller heard the entire conversation. So be mindful of those cameras and make sure that you educate your clients ahead of time on those types of things so that you guys can either step away and go to another location to discuss things, do a phone call, so that you're not having those conversations in front of the doorbell.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have had several sellers tell me that, and it's not just Ring doorbells. I mean, I have cameras outside of my house that I can hear. I can turn them on and hear what people are saying, and they're hidden cameras, hidden-ish. I mean, they're not your doorbell ones. You'd have to look up and see that they're there, but I can hear what people are saying. So be careful because and, you know, unfortunately, a lot of people have them inside their house too. So it's not even just that, although the front door one is probably the most common, there are also people who record audio inside their house. Legal, wrong, right, that's another debate, but it happens. All right, I think we are done with this one. All right, this leads us to Miss Lauren's portion of the agenda.
Okay. Well, you guys kind of gave a perfect segue into that. So basically the things I'm going to talk about are, there are a million different resources and like apps and different kinds of technology that you guys can use for your protection. Even if you do like a cursory Google search, you'll get a million different results. Honestly, the best one is going to be the one that you actually use. So here are a couple like really simple ones that are pretty intuitive and easy to integrate into your daily life, so it doesn't feel overwhelming or you don't forget to actually use it. HomeSnap is an app that we use a lot and encourage people to download for other reasons on the sales side. While looking into this, I did find out that HomeSnap Pro does offer some safety features as well, and those are free to realtors. So that could be something that you set up. It can send out like automated text messages to people based on timeframes. You can designate emergency contacts, all that kind of stuff. Okay, there we go. Another thing that you can do is, this one's specific to iPhone, and I have a slide for Android as well, so we haven't forgotten you. But you can use the Shortcuts app to create like automations so that, and I know Amanda has done this a bunch. She's actually who I learned this from. So I might put her on the spot here because she can probably speak to the effectiveness of it a little bit more than I can. But you can basically program a button, so it's just like any other app on your home screen, that when you touch it, it will automatically send your location to whatever contacts you designate via text message, and then you can set up an emergency button as well. So the share your location you could use for showings, you could use at the beginning of an open house, like kind of a proactive, I don't feel unsafe in this moment kind of a step. And then if you do feel unsafe, the in case of emergency button would be used to send a message. It would send a message to your chosen emergency contacts, including your location, and then send a second message to key contacts that you designate with whatever instructions that you program it. So I could show you how to set these up if you want, but because they are so specific to the individual and which contacts you want to add and what automations you want it to do, when you hit that button, it wasn't something that I could as easily create a tutorial for, since it is pretty personalized. But once you have them set up, they're super easy to use because it will just become a button on your home screen rather than an app that you have to log into and go through all the motions of getting it to work. The Android version of that, I will preface this by saying I don't have an Android phone, and I am not as well versed with them. So I'm sorry if this is not the most robust solution. But basically you can use Google to set up like your trusted contacts and then share your location with those people you can designate specific amounts of time. I looked into it to see if there was a way that you could create like that emergency button like you can on iPhone. There might be, but from what I could deduce, no. So if you have an Android, you could probably figure it out more easily than I could, is I guess what I'm getting at. But if you come to me and say that you want help figuring that out, we can Google it together. Honestly, those were the primary ones that I had. Like I said, there are a million out there, but I was trying to limit it to the ones that were most user-friendly and easiest to integrate into your life kind of seamlessly so that you would actually use it on a day-to-day basis. So those are what I have.
Thanks, Lauren.
Does anyone else have any that you use? Amanda, what do you do?
I use that shortcuts a lot. I have a few different setups, so I can help anybody that wants to set those up. But I have one where I just push a button and it sends a text to, I think, my mom and my husband and my current location, and it just continues to send them my location until I turn it off. And then I have a few other ones that do different things like that. But you can set up like a emergency one where it would send them a text saying like, I'm in trouble and your location, things like that. So I personally like those because it is just a one button. It does exactly what you want it to do instead of, like you said, having to open up an app and things like that.
If you're actually in a situation in which you need to utilize that, you're probably not going to like log in or like be there trying to get your Face ID to work.
Exactly.
Which is why I went that route as well, as it's the most easily accessible thing in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reality is if it's too hard to use, you're going to fumble, you're not going to get it done, it's not going to work. And I can't tell you how many times or how many things of mace I've purchased that are in my closet, in my car, I don't know, like whatever, right? So we just, something that's in your hand all the time is probably maybe not the best, but the one you're probably going to use. So yeah, those are perfect. Yeah, and I need you to help me set that up because that's fancy.
You cut out there, I couldn't hear you.
And you can set up those shortcuts.
I was talking
so that
to Amanda.
Okay.
You can
Coming
even
in
set
loud
those
and
up.
clear now.
You can even set them up so you don't even have to push a button. You can make it say, I want the shortcut to run when I say like, hey Siri, I'm in trouble. Then it'll start running that shortcut for you. So you don't even have to have it in your hand.
I was looking into this. I think there are some like accessibility options that they call them too, where you can like, if you tap the back of your phone a couple times, or if you hit like your volume up button a couple times, you can designate that as well. So like I said, in the moment, you're probably not going to be like sitting there trying to get your Face ID to work. So that's a little bit more accessible, even on top of the easy use of an app.
Yeah, thanks guys. That's awesome. We could probably even we'll just keep adding more stuff to Amanda's plate because she loves it. But you know, I mean, that is a really good thing for everyone to put on their phone. So if you're on this call, I really encourage you to figure it out. And if not, ask Amanda for help because obviously she's figured it out. So let's do it. Okay, so we wanted to hear from anyone who had any other scary stories to share. If you ever found yourself in an unsafe situation where maybe it was just your gut and nothing really happened, but I'm a big believer in your gut talking to you. There was something that was going to happen and you were smart enough to figure out for it not to happen. Those intuition tells us a lot. So does anyone have any stories situations, I should say, that have come up that they'd be willing to share briefly here to the group? Or advice that you've learned from somebody else along the way?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Anne.
So this was actually the day of the Christmas party last year. I had a last minute showing at my unit down on Marcy Plaza in Soma. And I got there and I'd already been in the neighborhood because I was having an elevator issue at the lofts. So I just kind of zipped down the street, and the guy got there and he said, "Hey, do you mind if I see if my car will fit in the garage?" I'm like, not a horrible, unusual request at Soma, because if you have a truck, they don't always fit. So I said, sure. Well, he comes backing in and he comes down the street, he backs in and he's got just a little BMW. And I'm like, well, how would this car not fit in the garage? It would fit in any garage. And then he comes walking in and he's got a big backpack on. And I'm like, this is weird. And like you said, Susan, it was just a total gut feeling. So then he takes off his coat and he starts taking off his shirt, and I just went down the stairs. It was just really weird that he starts undressing. So I just left and I went and I stood in the middle of Marcy Plaza and pretended that I was on the phone with the elevator guy. And it took about 10 minutes for this guy to realize that I wasn't coming back in. And he finally came down and left. And it was just really weird. It kind of freaked me out the rest of the day.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't hear this before. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So he just like eventually got in his car and left and didn't say anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what was his exit like in terms of like acknowledgement?
And did he have clothes back on?
Yeah,
He
like,
did.
we need to know
And
more.
he had a t-shirt on, but he had like just like a polo, a button-up polo. So he like rolled up the sleeves and he was unbuttoning it. And I'm like, I don't know what your game is here, dude, but I'm not going to be part of it. And so I just went down the stairs and I just stood there, and it was weird.
Yeah, and
Really odd. And so when he finally came down, I'm like, I held the phone, like pretended like I was still on the phone, and I'm like, hey, I'm dealing with an emergency. Do you have any questions? You have my number. You can follow up with me. He's like, yeah, I'm going to make application. I really like the place. I'm like, great. I'll talk to you next week. And he got in his car and he left, and I locked it up and I got the heck out of there.
Yeah. Did you ever hear from him?
I was gonna say, did he make the application?
No, of course not.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
See, and that's 100% like instinct, too many weird things. And not always the best thing to, let people in a property, but I would say all day, every day, that is the right choice. You did exactly the right thing. Yeah.
Well, even when I did Fannie Mae, I remember showing up at houses where I would have to go take BPO pictures or meet somebody, and I would show up, like you said, Susan, never park in the driveway. I always parked in the street. But I pulled up one time and there's like 5 guys on the porch across the street in a not so nice neighborhood. And I just kept going. And I called my showing and said, I have had a family emergency. I'll have to reschedule. And I waited until my husband could go with me.
Yep. And that's okay. Yep.
I wasn't staying there. I'm not going to have these 5 guys come walking in across the street or whatever.
It always baffles me.
Many times do I stay at the porch. I will either stay on the porch or I'll stay right inside the front door. And if they have a question about the furnace or something, I'll be like, I can ask the owner, but I have no knowledge of that.
Mm-hmm. It always baffles me why people would think that would be okay. Like, if there wasn't something brewing or something weird, like I think that most people would realize that, oh, maybe this is uncomfortable for you to go into a house with 5 men that you don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming too much there, but it seems like common sense to me.
And it's difficult to like not want to be rude. And I think that's something that is ingrained in us just sociologically and of course like within our profession. But honestly, like the biggest thing I've learned is like the risk of being rude or being perceived as rude is worth the reward.
Yep, exactly. And that's why I keep saying like, and I've probably said this too many times, but give yourself permission to be safe. Mm-hmm. Like blame it on something else. If you don't want to be perceived rude, say, it's company policy or the seller wants it this way or whatever. Like just allow yourself to not have to be in those situations because it's never worth it.
Yeah. And if they're legit, there are a million ways that you can like backpedal from that and explain it later. Like,
Yep.
if
I was
they're
just gonna say
legit,
that.
then it's going to be like, it's going to work itself out anyway.
Exactly. Does anyone else have a story to share or tip or trick?
I have one.
Yeah.
So when I was showing apartments, I got a phone call from someone, and my gut went up in the phone call just because of his personality constantly changed just in the call alone. So I had someone, one of the other leasing agents, was going to show the apartment with me for the appointment that I had scheduled. But then the guy decided to show up an hour and a half early. So I told him I already had an appointment and I had to go to that appointment, and then I would come back at our original time. So then when I came back at the original time, he was really like profusely sweating because I had another guy with me, and he also had a big backpack, which I find maybe that's their MO. I don't know. But he also had a big backpack. He had 2 IDs from 2 different states, which was interesting. But I also carry hand weapons and stuff with me. And after that instance, that's when I decided to go get my conceal and carry as well, because that instance scared me so bad that I was like, okay, there's definitely some crazy people out there, so I'm going to protect myself.
Well, Shannon, you can, in the apartment world, you guys are required to get ID to show, right?
Yeah.
Shannon used to lease apartments, if you didn't gather yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So, you know, why is that not, why don't we do that? You know, if it's normal for you,
Yeah, I
it can be
was
normal for us.
actually kind of wondering the same thing. If apartments require it, how come houses don't?
Mm-hmm.
And I second that. I mean, rarely,
What was that?
rarely, I said I second that. Rarely do people argue with you. Once in a while, but there's a reason they're arguing with you. They don't want to show their ID.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Rochelle also used to do that. And yeah, I mean, if it's normal, then why can't it be normal all the way around? So I think everyone here can decide that's normal for you. That's what you're doing. The important thing to remember is that for fair housing reasons, whatever you do for one person, you have to do for everyone. So if you say, as of today, September 24th, 2020, any showings I do, I'm going to require ID, then you're legit, you're good. But what you can't do is not require ID from Sweet Amanda, who shows up to look at your house, but then require ID from Eric because he looks scary. You can't do that. You have to be consistent. Anyone have anything else?
It wasn't really me personally, but I know Susan knows this story. I had a vacant listing recently that got broken into, and the seller just happened to be stopping at the house, noticed some weird things going on. We realized that the house was broken into. I thought maybe the inspector had just left the door unlocked, but then more and more things came up and we realized the house was broken into, and they had the house set up so that they could come back later that night and probably steal the copper pipes or the appliances or something along those lines. And it was scary because it happened during the day. We know that because of the inspection happened in the morning. The seller came at like 2 o'clock. So this happened in a 4-hour window in broad daylight. And God only knows what would have happened if she got there a little bit earlier, or if she had never stopped there, the house could have been destroyed. So going forward, I'm probably going to suggest sellers, if your house is vacant, to get something, even those cheap little stick-on door alarms, so that if the door opens, they get a loud noise and it scares them off or something. It was kind of creepy, felt very invasive.
Yeah, and not a scary neighborhood, not a scary house. Like there was no like red flag reason to be concerned about this house. So yeah. I mean, you never know. 100% never know. Anything else, you guys?
I'm a prime example of why you don't leave pets in your house when you list.
What'd you do?
I had a dog when I listed my house, and she was a bit of an escape artist. So we thought having her kenneled was good enough. But she was kenneled in our basement, and apparently like she was able to escape from the wire kennel, and the real estate agent, which actually was Derek, went in to show it, or a real estate agent went to show it. Derek was our listing agent. And Jada was out and scared. So they locked her in the basement, and then she then proceeded to, in a panic, destroy my basement. So I had to replace all the carpet in my basement and do a lot of cleanup right before selling my house.
So that
I'm
is
really
a great
sorry that
story.
happened to you, but I'm really happy that that story didn't end with like your dog went missing forever, because I was really going to be upset if that's how we ended this call.
No,
but
that is,
unfortunately, Jada did have to find a new home after that because she had severe separation anxiety and could not handle us being at work.
oh man. Yeah, see, so it's hard on the dog. It's hard on everybody. So it's just best to not. So that's a great story that people can now share with their sellers as to why they should take their dogs out of the house for showings, because it wasn't good for the dog and it wasn't good for you or the agent. So yeah, not good. All right, you guys, we are going to end this. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate that you take safety serious and that you showed up here. Even if it was for credit hours, I appreciate that you were here and listened to what we had to say. So let me know if you ever have any questions or if you're ever concerned. I know anyone on this team would show a house with you, would co-host an open, would do anything, because that's just how we all roll. So thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.